Well, hello. We're live now. We're just going to give it a couple of moments to let people tune in. Oh, hello. Look, we've got our first few guests. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, hello. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. It's a bit like being a flight attendant in a very, very virtual way. I'm just going to welcome people aboard for a few minutes, shall I? Oh, and Waves, thank you so much. Ooh, this is very exciting. I have not done many Instagram lives, so this is thrilling. Hello, welcome aboard. Thank you for the waves. That's very good. Oh, hello, how are you? Lovely to see you. Sip of tea for everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Oh, and floating hearts. Oh my goodness. Instagram Live is going to be very exciting, I can tell already. Hopes that I'm easily amused. But hello, everybody. Lovely to see all of you. Very nice to see all of you from different parts. I see we've got hello Dusseldorf, hello UAE YFC, welcome aboard. Again, lovely to see everyone. We'll do a few welcomes, shall we? Just to let everyone get on board before we begin the full presentation. I probably should have gone ahead and prepared a dance number, but I didn't. Maybe next time. Oh, that'll what we save for next week. Hello, welcome aboard. Thanks for the waves. Hello, hello. Very excited about this. Although, I have to say, I miss doing live presentations because, I can get... Oh, hi! Because I can hear laughter. So, although I'm pretty thrilled because you can send little waves. I'm going to take that as laughter or something like that. So, I'll just be watching for that. No, I have not come and spoken at FIS yet. We need to fix that. Let's have a cunning plan. Thank you for the belated birthday wishes as well. It's very, very kind. I am going to share, those of you who have tuned in the first couple of minutes, I'm going to share with you, I'm very proud of this, because doing live presentations, like a live, hello, live, oh, hello, Ali, doing live, hello, Ali, doing live presentations, my name is so... Oh, you didn't even... Oh, you did spell right. Okay, that's acceptable. That's acceptable. Doing live presentations, I get to hear laughter. So, I have decided that what I'm going to go ahead and do is just... I've recorded my own laugh tracks. That's what I'm doing. So listen, we're going to run a little sample test, okay? I have 3 laugh tracks that I'm just going to play whenever I think I'm funny. So, hello! So here we go. This is, I need to make sure, everybody can hear them and everything. It's, we're doing our sound checks now. So here's here's laugh number 1. When something incredibly hilarious happens. Okay, so that was pretty, that was good. And it made hearts come on the screen, so that's good. I do get sidetracked easily. Here's laugh number 2. Yeah, I've got a selection of laugh tracks. Ready? Oh no, technical difficulties. Here we go. Laugh number 2. Realize that is an entire 9 seconds of laughter. We're never going to get anything done. And what? There's a third laugh track? Yes, there is. Again, another whole 9 seconds of laughter. We're going to use that. So there we go. All right. Now, I am funny. Thank you. I forget that there's little comments on this. It's going to be... I'm not going to get distracted. I'm going to get a little distracted. But I'm very excited that you've all joined because we need to chat, shall we? We need to have a wee chat. Today, as has been advertised, we are going to be talking about empathy. And empathy is something that I talk about a lot. And so I was very excited to get to share this with you live. So I think empathy is important now because you may have noticed it's slightly difficult times. And by slightly difficult times, I mean an awful lot of people are feeling very, very cooped up. And that makes sense. I myself am suffering from this. I don't know if many of you know, but I'm not used to being in one place for very long at all. In fact, normally I'm really only in a place for about a week. And what this means is that I can be charming for a week. I can be super charming for a week. I can absolutely make people think that I'm, a great person and easy to get along with for a whole week. After a week, though, I start to get a little more annoying. Admittedly, after a week, I think even the people around me start to get a little more annoying. And some of you may be experiencing exactly this. Perhaps some of you are also feeling a bit cooped up. Perhaps some of you have been stuck around the same people for a while now, and maybe that's beginning to get a little bit old. And I feel for you. I really, really do. Because no matter what, being cooped up is going to make life difficult. No matter what, being stuck around people for extended period of time is going to make life difficult. Which means this is a fantastic time to practice some empathy. So, we're going to chat about empathy a bit. First, a definition of empathy. Empathy is one of those words that has an awful lot of definitions. I'm going to go with a super simple one because I'm easily amused. And so the super simple definition of empathy is simply that empathy is the ability to be moved by the feelings of other people. That's it. Empathy is the ability to be moved by the feelings of other people. And it's different than sympathy. We sometimes get those confused. Sympathy is sort of the recognition of other people's feelings. Empathy is actually doing something about it. So sympathy might be saying, oh, it sounds like you've had a bad day. That's sympathy. You're saying, I recognize you seem to be having a bad day. I can tell by sad. But empathy is when you're moved to action. Empathy is when you say, I can tell you're having a bad day. Why don't you talk to me about that? Can I do anything? So empathy is sympathy plus action. And that's a very good thing. So thank you for catching the feelings. I appreciate it. There's a verse that I think actually super simply sums it up really, really well. It's Romans 12:15. And it simply says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And that's action. Sympathy would just be looking at someone and saying, oh, you're rejoicing. Well done. Or, oh, you're weeping. Well done. Actually, you shouldn't say well done to people weeping usually. But that verse sums it up. It's taking actions. It's actually taking on those feelings for yourself. And I do believe, and I'm backed up by science on this, and we do like things backed up by science. I believe we're built for empathy. You see, we have mirror neurons in our brains. And mirror neurons basically is this lovely little network up there that helps you connect with other people. It helps you recognize other people's feelings. So that's a very good thing. The fact that we were built for it, that our brains are actually designed for empathy, means to me that we should probably be paying attention to empathy. And here's the very scary thing. Research from the University of has defined the fact that we actually have had a 40% decline in empathy in the last 30 years. That's actually pretty intense. A 40% decline, that's losing almost half. That means if you translated that into volume, it means that people being 40% less empathetic, it would be like if 40% of the volume from the feelings you thought that you were projecting were cut off. So maybe you think you're giving out your feelings at this volume, but what everyone actually hears is only at this volume. And that's pretty terrifying, actually. That kind of decline in empathy is really rough. And I think that actually we're being challenged even more with it right now because we're cooped up, and it's hard to be empathetic with people when you're cooped up with them. The Bible has a lot to say about empathy, believe it or not. In fact, the Golden Rule, which you may have heard of, hopefully you've heard of the Golden Rule. It's talked about quite a bit. The Golden Rule is do unto others as you would like done unto yourself. That actually comes from, it's based on Matthew 7:12, which says, so whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law of the prophets. And that's kind of empathy at its core level, is you want to take action based on other people's feelings. One of the big reasons that empathy is declining is that we're overwhelmed. I think that in all honesty, we've had to turn down some of our empathy because there's just so much around us. And now people really are feeling very overwhelmed. I'm not really sure, but how many of you feel just a little bit overwhelmed right now? Maybe you're a little bit overwhelmed by quarantine. Maybe you're a little overwhelmed by the unpredictability of it all. Maybe you're overwhelmed because you can't socialize the way that we used to socialize. I definitely feel overwhelmed. For goodness sakes, I'm used to being on a plane every week, and now I'm not. In fact, as a little side note, we had to recreate a plane here in the house for me for my birthday. We set up the kitchen like it was an airport lounge, and I just got to go through and graze and get little things. And we used the Alexas in the house to constantly make flight delays. It was fantastic, actually. But for those of you who are feeling overwhelmed, the danger is that that's one of the things that cuts off our empathy. I am having plane withdrawal. This is very true. And so, with this decline in empathy, it makes it much harder to read other people's feelings. Weirdly, as much as we're using social media now, social media is definitely one of the things that makes us feel overwhelmed. Because we know so much, so much. Back in the day, you only really knew things through kind of conversation, and for that, it was people right around you. Now we've got information coming at us on every possible level. We know things happening locally, we know things happening in our country, in our world. We have 24-hour streams of news. We have so much information. And if you actually were moved by all of that information all the time, you would be absolutely and totally and completely overwhelmed. You'd never even get out of bed. So we've actually tuned down some of our empathy, and it's making life difficult. So, what is it that we can do to help us bring back some empathy? Good question. I'm so glad you asked it. By you, I mostly mean me. Why have I not used a laugh track yet? That deserves at least one of them. I know, right? It's funny. It's funny because I asked the question and pretended like you did. Anyway, what can we do? I've decided that one of the things that we can do to help us be a little more empathetic is pay far more attention to the why instead of the what. And here's what I mean by that. A lot of times we're affected by the what. And that makes sense because the what is what we perceive. For example, action, that's a what. So some actions, actually the what is important. If you're driving in a car with someone, actually if you're the passenger in a car, and whoever you're driving with stops at a stop sign, that what is pretty important. You don't actually need to know much of the why for that. That is not the time to enter into a deep philosophical conversation and look over at the driver and say, why? Why did you stop at that stop sign? The why isn't important. The what is. In fact, if they go ahead and give you some deep philosophical response, say, well, I stopped at this stop sign because the hustle and bustle of life are just too much, and I decided that this big red sign in front of me was the universe telling me that I need to stop and smell the car exhaust. That really doesn't matter. Oh, that was funny too. That deserves a laugh. There we go. I'm going to have to cut way shorter laughs. We can't have 9 seconds every time I say something funny. We'll never get done. And Amy Kellogg brings up a very good point. If you live in the Middle East, you should never be driving with your sunroof open because people without hair, that's painful for us, okay? Sunroofs are for people with hair, so lucky you for having hair, but some of us don't get to deal with that, okay? Just empathize with me a little bit. Oh, that deserves a laugh. That part was funny. Forgot my own laugh was at the end of that. I mean, it's all my own laugh. Anyway, that is not the time for a deep philosophical conversation. The what is you stopped at a stop sign. The what is that you didn't open the sunroof because your passenger is bald. But sometimes in life, the why is more important than the what. For instance, let's say that you're quarantined at home. I know this is hard to relate to. I'm not even going to play the laugh track at that. Let's say you're quarantined at home and somebody in the room with you storms out. The what there is pretty obvious. They've stormed out. And the why, actually, I would say, is probably more important. You see, I think sometimes we get so overwhelmed with the what that we don't bother thinking about the why. And in that instance, if someone stormed out of the room, perhaps the what triggers a whole bunch of emotions in you. Perhaps the what is you think, well, how rude, they just stormed out. Perhaps the what is, oh my gosh, they don't like me. They can't even stand to be in the same room with me. And then we react purely off of that what. So maybe you go storming after them and you say, why? Why would you storm out? Why can't you stand to be in the same room with me? When in all actuality, their why may actually hold way more information. Perhaps their why is that they were sitting in the room with you and You basically completely ignored them. Maybe you were on your phone playing Dr. Mario. It's so addictive. Or Clash Royale. Not that I play Clash Royale. Oh, that deserves a laugh because I really do play it. Seriously, 9 seconds. So, if you were in the room ignoring them, perhaps they stormed out because they felt ignored by you. But you might not actually get to that if you don't bother thinking about their why. We have to be careful not to only react to the what, but to also react to the why. Knowing why someone does what they do is really, really helpful. But that requires empathy. It means putting yourself in their shoes. It's something I think that we have to be really careful to try to do, especially when we're in close quarters with a bunch of people. Empathy, you see, is very powerful. Empathy helps hold us together, but it does get harder when we're surrounded by people all of the time. I think, in all honesty, there's a phrase that I've heard quite a bit, and it says familiarity breeds contempt, and I think that's actually true. Again, for maybe the first week or so around someone, you can be lovely and charming, but after a week, you become familiar, and everything starts to lose its charm. I think a lot of times I get to be a guest in people's houses, and I can do that for a week. I'm a phenomenal guest. And, for the first week or so, maybe you say things like, I don't mind what we have for breakfast. Whatever you're making is totally fine. But really, after about a week, all of that nice polish begins to wear off. And after a week, it probably devolves into, really? Oatmeal? Again? We're doing oatmeal again? Fine, just feed me oat. What am I, a horse? Do you not care about me at all? Selfish. All right, that's a bit of a drastic step, really, over breakfast. But still, that's a thing. And so empathy is important because the polish will wear off. We have to practice more empathy as the polish wears off. The polish is probably wearing off. Thank you, by the way, for those of you saying that I'm a phenomenal guest. I wasn't fishing for that, but I'll take. Oh, that deserves a laugh. Wasn't fishing for it, but I'll take it. I'm just gonna start cutting myself off because really 9 seconds of laughter is too much. So let's look a little bit further at empathy in the Bible, because believe it or not, empathy is all throughout the Bible. In fact, I would go so far as to say the entire story of Jesus is one of empathy. The fact that Almighty God had his own son come down to be amongst his creation is the story of empathy. An Almighty God who is all-powerful, who created everything, the God of the universe, who made things we don't even know about, and everything we do know about, the God of the universe who made teacups and cats and 747s and picture frames and mugs and just looking around the room and naming things at this point, the God of the universe who made all of that is way too big to fit into our minds. Even a mind as, unprotected by hair as mine, that's very vulnerable in sunroofs. Way too big to fit in our minds. And yet, he wants a personal relationship with us. That's empathy. Jesus is the symbol of God wanting a personal relationship with us. More than a symbol, Jesus is the reality of God wanting a personal relationship with us. In fact, Hebrews 4:15 puts it very succinctly. It says, "For we do not have a high priest," which is referring to Jesus, "who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin." Jesus is the story of God's empathy for us. And one of the stories I think that supplies a really great example, one of the stories that I think lives that out really well, is the story of Lazarus. You can find this in John 11. I'm gonna summarize it a little bit. But in John 11, we find the story of Lazarus. And Lazarus was one of Jesus' friends. And in fact, it introduces it and says, "Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair." So this Mary and Martha come from another story in the Bible that relates closely to Jesus and has great lessons. So basically, Mary, one of the people from that story, her brother is sick. So the sisters sent word to Jesus. They said, "Lord, the one you love is sick." So we can tell from that Lazarus was a good friend of Jesus. So when he heard this, Jesus said to them, "The sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So the Bible actually repeats itself that these were friends of Jesus. So Jesus basically does. He eventually makes his way over to see Lazarus because he's been told he's been sick, but it takes him a while to get there. And the Bible says that on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. So when Jesus arrived, Lazarus had been dead, not just dead, but dead and in a tomb for 4 days. And if you recall, right before this, when Jesus first heard, he actually said, the sickness won't end in death. So this was probably pretty confusing to the people right around him, who then said, and yet it kind of ended in death. In fact, it ended in so much death, he's been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Jesus is there, and Mary comes out to meet him. And when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet. And Mary, again, is Lazarus' brother. So Mary's brother has just died. He's been in the tomb 4 days, and Jesus, his friend, arrives. And she says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, there was a load of people gathered still mourning the loss of Lazarus, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And Jesus wept. And you'll hear quite a bit, actually, that Jesus wept is the shortest verse in the whole Bible. I like that because it makes it super easy to remember, but that is an incredible example of Jesus being empathetic. Jesus said from the beginning, Jesus is the Son of God. He knows what's going to happen. And he did say, the sickness will not end in death. And yet, it looks like Lazarus has died. Jesus knows more than that, and though he knows that, he still wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could he who opened the eyes of the blind man not kept this man from dying? So now the crowd is basically saying, Jesus performs miracles, and he was so late getting here, he didn't perform the miracle in time. Lazarus died. Maybe they thought that's why he was weeping. Jesus, once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. And he said, take away the stone. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor, for he's been in there 4 days. I like that part. That is very, very real. I feel like even in the midst of miracles, it's okay to bring up real things. And that was a real thing. Jesus, I believe in your power, but it is going to stink in there. Okay. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. It's an incredible story of empathy because Jesus knew the whole time that Lazarus was going to be alive. Jesus knew what he was going to do. He knew that this death was not final. He knew all of these things, and yet he still wept. He could have not had empathy. He could have showed up and basically been an incredible told you so or a know-it-all and been like, oh my gosh, quit your whining and wailing. I'm going to raise him from the dead. Stop it. But he didn't. He cried because he was moved. He was moved by the sadness of Lazarus' sister. He was moved by the sadness of the crowd, even though he knew what was going on. I think we experience this sometimes ourselves with little kids. If a little kid falls and skins their knee, they cry like it's the end of the world, like their legs have been ripped off. And we as adults usually know it's actually not the end of the world. You will recover from a grazed knee. But it still makes us sad. We still empathize. We still love kids. And when they're sad, we're sad. I think that's how God feels about us. And I think because Jesus is empathetic, we are called to be empathetic. In fact, John 15:12, in the same book, John 15:12 says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. When Jesus says that to us, he means many things. Jesus laid down his life for his friends. Jesus was empathetic with people. Jesus was the ultimate example of love, and love is tied up in empathy. I have one last story because I don't want to keep you too long. Thank you so much for taking part of your evening to sit with me. One last story, and I use this story an awful lot, but I'm going to use it again because I can. Because I got dressed up and actually put on, clothes as if I'm going somewhere for this. So we're going to listen to my stories. And I often use a story of when I was moving around growing up. How sometimes that's rough. I don't know if you guys know, but moving can be rough. And I remember being picked on. And remember being picked on because it's rough being the new kid. Sometimes I was the new kid and I stood out quite a bit. I stood out because of my accent. I moved from a small village in England to a large city in America. was the only person in my school with a British accent, which is why I learned to speak American, because I got picked on for being a small British child. So we're going to do the rest of the talk in an English accent because I can, because I want to go back to my past. We're going to talk about my past. But I did. I was picked on for having a British accent. Everybody listened to how I said things rather than what I actually said. And to this day, the people, even from my childhood, who stick in my mind are the people who were empathetic to me. I think there were quite a lot of people who maybe were sympathetic. I think as I was being picked on, loads and loads of people probably looked at me and said, oh, that looks rough. But only a few people took action. Only a few people were empathetic and actually did something to help me. And I distinctly remember those are the people who stuck in my mind. So much that they stuck in my mind that I decided I needed to do the same. And in future moves, I actually tried my very best to be an empathetic person. There's one of my favorite stories. It's the one I'll close with. Although many of you are saying I can just go on forever. Don't tempt me, people, because I will. I've got more laugh tracks than you think I have. But I really do. I remember when I got to middle school, met a girl named Stephanie. She was the new kid, and she got picked on quite a bit because she's from Eastern Europe. She's the only person in her school from Eastern Europe, so she brought different food to everyone else. She had a different accent to everyone else, and she was picked on quite viciously. And I distinctly remember I wanted to do something about it. And I was quite terrified as a middle schooler because, I distinctly remember being picked on myself. And I didn't want to have that happen again, but I wanted to do something. So I made a deal. I thought every time I see Stephanie, I will at least talk to her. Every time I see Stephanie, I will at least empathize. I want her to know that I know what she's going through and I'm taking action. So that was the deal. And this deal didn't work very well because I was a very shy middle schooler. And so whenever I would see Stephanie, the dream of talking to her never quite came about as well as I thought it would. I had this incredible plan. And after class, I was like, oh, there's Stephanie. All right, go to Stephanie and say something magical. So be like, Stephanie, hi, how are you? I know who, blah, 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 and just make her feel known. But I was so excited about it that I didn't really, I should have walked over calmly like a normal person and said, hello, Stephanie. Instead, I went charging at her like a tank because I was so excited about my plan, which looks very threatening when people come charging at you like a tank. That probably scared her. And then, because I was so worried about looking like a tank, I completely forgot what I was going to say. And so by the time I got to Stephanie, unfortunately, my first sentence to her was not something lovely and insightful. My first sentence to Stephanie was exactly this, word for word. I got up to her and I said, hi, Stephanie. I've got legs. Which is a horrible thing to say to someone. That's just weird. That doesn't even deserve a laugh. That just deserves a... And so I decided I would regroup. I would go ahead and do better. So the next time that I saw Stephanie, I tried again. It also went badly. And came up to Stephanie again and said, hi, Stephanie. And then got nervous again and said, do you like bread? Which is also a very weird thing to say to people. And I think it just scared Stephanie. But I stuck with it. My best efforts at empathy may have made me sound like a weird person, but I stuck with it and tried. So every time I saw Stephanie, I would talk to her about weird stuff. And when our school eventually closed, we were at a military base and our school closed and everybody moved away. And I thought about Stephanie quite a bit. I thought about it because I thought, I've got to do better than that. And I remember getting to the next school and trying really hard to make sure and empathize with people. Later on, this actually made a huge difference, and it ties up weirdly in a bank. Graduated high school and eventually worked in a bank, which was great. And as a quick detail on this, our bank was fantastic because you used to get a bonus if you got robbed. Because if a robber came in, you would give out a die pack to the robber because the robber comes in and says, "Get me all your money," and you go, "Oh, okay." And then you give them a bunch of cash, and in there is a little die pack, and it explodes once they leave the bank, and they don't know it. And it's just a nice way to catch robbers because then they're covered in ink. So when the police come by, they can go, "Who robbed this?" But oh, probably the guy covered in ink. So anyway, we would get bonuses. So we would fight over whose turn it was to get robbed. We would have staff meetings and be like, "All right, James was robbed 2 weeks ago. Claire was robbed last month. So I call next robbery. I get the next one." And we'd be like, "Oh, fine. Chris gets the next robbery." And so one particular day, I was sitting there doing my banky thing, giving out the cash, doing the thing, and a suspicious character walked in. And I was very excited because I thought, "Ha, robbery!" And they did exactly what a suspicious robbing type person would do. They sort of moved through the line. They were very... And we have an instant messenger, so I told all the other bank workers, "This one's mine, I called the robber." And finally, they got to me, and I said, next! And they came up, and I was very excited because normally in a robbery, they just slide a note across the desk, and it says, get me all the cash and press no alarms, which is really dumb. We have a ton of alarms. And so they slid a note across, and I was already spending the $500 bonus in my mind.
It's
but the note,
9:30.
thank you, darling. But the note was very, very suspicious because it was long. It was 2 pages, front and back. It was very long. And it started with Dear Chris. And it's very weird to get a personalized robbery note. Not many robbers take the time to personalize a robbery note. Hello, Dear Chris. I'm going to be robbing you today. My name's Joe, and I'm going to spend the money I steal on a pony. That's a weird robbery note. But this one did. It said, Dear Chris. And the next line was even more confusing. And it said, Dear Chris, you may not realize it, but we know each other. And I thought, well, this is the most ridiculous robbery ever. Because if I know you, it's not going to be very helpful, is it? Because if I know you and the police say, can you describe the robber? And I'm going to say, yeah, it's this friend I know. The note continued on. And in fact, it was Stephanie, the girl from middle school. And she described what it was like going to middle school. And it was really quite sad hearing it from her perspective, how being picked on made her feel so alone. And she went on in the note and actually talked about how all of that moved her so much that by the time she graduated from high school, she really didn't think she'd even keep on going. And so she became incredibly depressed. And she said that she was actually considering taking her own life. And that she sat late at night on her bed, deciding that that was it, that she wouldn't even leave any sort of note because who would care? And as she went over all the memories in life that brought her to where she was, she said she remembered me, which is a little bit scary to hear, to be honest. And she said that I remember you used to say the most ridiculous things to me in middle school. And I thought, oh, fantastic. I contributed to this poor girl's pain. But she didn't say that. She said, whenever you were talking to me, nobody else would be picking on me. And so for just those few minutes, I felt safe. For just a few minutes, I felt like I was okay. And she said, I actually really looked forward to those moments. They gave me hope. And she ended the note by saying that basically that feeling of hope that she had that night, just by thinking of the ridiculous things I said to her, was enough for her to decide to go and see a counselor. And basically, many years later, she saw me working in the bank and decided she needed to come thank me. And so she gave me this note and said, I just wanted to thank you. It's because of you that I'm alive today. And I really appreciate that. A little bit of empathy goes a very, very long way. I think that one of the takeaways from this, we sat around with my bank actually, because they thought this was the most terrible robbery they'd ever seen. In fact, it ended, Stephanie left. I was crying my eyes out, and the bank said, you realize that you didn't actually give any money, right? That was a terrible robbery. And I was like, so, showed them the note, they started crying. We closed the whole bank and ended up coming up with this little piece of wisdom that I want to leave you with. And it is simply this: every interaction either gives or takes life. There's no such thing as a neutral exchange. This sounds a bit easier when we have loads of people to interact with, but I think it applies all the more when we're cooped up with a small group of people. Every interaction gives or takes life. You may be stuck with your families, you may be stuck with your siblings, you may not have the wide group of people that you're used to, but still, every interaction gives or takes life. The way you talk to your parents gives or takes life from them. The way you talk to your siblings gives or takes life from them. Reaching out to a friend who maybe is feeling lonely, even it's over Zoom or Skype or Instagram or Facebook Messenger or Snapchat, we could keep going with the list. All of those things give or take life. Empathy is incredibly important because empathy helps keep the conduits of life flowing. I want to leave you with one last verse. We've talked quite a bit out of John, out of the story of Lazarus and Jesus' commandment to us to be empathetic. But I like this one too. Ephesians 4:32 says, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. So once again, Jesus is the ultimate example of this. Jesus was empathetic. Jesus was forgiving. We need to be empathetic and forgiving. We're going to get on each other's nerves so much more. So this is the time to practice a bit of empathy. Think about the why, not just the what. Why are people doing what they're doing? If you find someone annoying, why are they being annoying? Is it because they need attention? Is it because they're frustrated? What are the actual feelings going on underneath that? If you think about the why and not just the what, if you remember that every interaction gives or takes life, we're going to get through this much, much easier. So, everybody, thank you very, very much for joining in on this. I'm going to try really hard to read some of the comments because we should do question and answer time. That's what we should do for the next couple of minutes. I like that. Oh, don't leave. Well, we'll have to leave eventually because I'm running low on tea, but we've got a few more minutes. Oh, that's very true. Thank you for the birthday wishes. Several of you have birthdays around here. So it's the Queen's birthday, incidentally, was a couple of days ago. So happy birthday, Her Majesty. So there we go. Oh, that's a very good reminder before we do go, is that we're going to do this for a few weeks. So please do tune in again next week with a slight change at the same time, but on a slightly different day. So we did it Friday this week. Next week it's going to be on Thursday. So please do come back and join us all again next Thursday at let me see if I can remember all these times. Next Thursday at 6 p.m. for Europe. 7 p.m. for Ukraine. I did see some of my friends from Ukraine on here. Hello, thanks for coming. 8 p.m. for those of you in the Middle East. Saw some friends from Bahrain and the UAE, so thank you for joining. So at those times, 6, 7, and 8 for Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East. Please do join us on Thursday again. That would be delightful. So if you have any questions or thoughts, please do feel free to message us, and we'd love to see you again next time. It's not quite the same as being able to be there in person with you, but it's the best we've got right now, so we're going to make the most of it. And if you come back next week, I'm going to have even more laughter. that one's a bit overwhelming, I'm not going to lie. We may not use that one again. And I promise the laugh tracks will be even shorter than 9 seconds, because that's just a bit too much, really. So yeah, once again, thank you so very much for joining us. I miss all of you so very much. Oh, someone said, wait, what time? One more time. Let's see if I get these right. You should look at the advertising to make sure they're right in case I'm messing them up. But I do believe it's 6 p.m. in Europe on Thursday, 7 p.m. in Ukraine and Eastern Europe on Thursday, and 8 p.m. in the Middle East on Thursday. So thank you ever so much. You are lovely, lovely people. I really do. I miss you tons and tons and tons. I hope you're keeping well. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be careful out there. God save the Queen. Weigh anchor and let's set sail on the ship of dreams. We're going to be empathetic and we're going to get through it. It is a chocolate track. It's very true. Now I'm going to go and try to read all the comments that everyone left. So yeah, thanks very much for joining us. I'm going to try to press buttons now and see what happens. Oh, I don't know how to stop this. Oh, there's an end button. Otherwise, I may just have to drag you around with me all day, which wouldn't be near as exciting as you think. I'm not going to lie. I'm actually still wearing sweatpants. I mean, I got, dressed with a shirt and everything for the presentation, but back to sweatpants after this. Yeah, that's right. More tea and sweatpants. That's what I'm going to do. Oh, I'm dragging this goodbye out. Right, everyone. Thank you so much. It's been lovely. I miss you, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.